Hello everyone, and welcome to the Holland Land Office Museum's Artifact of the Day video series. My name is Ryan Duffy, I'm the director here at the museum, and today I'd like to talk to you about one of our most well-known pieces. This is the Genesee County Gibbet. And now, many of you might be asking, well, what is a gibbet? Well, a gibbet is an execution device that is used to execute prisoners. Now, the method of execution is done by hanging, in which the condemned is set on the ground with a noose around his neck, and a weight is dropped and the noose goes up. Now, the purpose of this was to break the prisoner's neck and kill them. However, it wasn't the most effective means of execution, and usually the prisoner would have to struggle for a few seconds and would eventually die from strangulation, not from breaking of the neck. Now, our gibbet is often called a gallows incorrectly because that is the implement that many people recognize. A gallows differs from a gibbet, though it functions the same. A gallows has a trapdoor and a mechanism which drops the condemned, not hoists them up. So they function the same way, or they lead to the same end by the same method, but actually function quite opposite. Now, this gibbet stood at the first Genesee County Jail, which was a few hundred yards west of us here at the museum. The jail site was roughly where Oliver's Candy Store is today. And the execution yard was just east of that, in basically what is the Mavis Tire Shop parking lot today. So the gibbet didn't have to move too far in order to make it to the museum here. The gibbet came to the museum in the early 1980s. It was actually found in a local barn. The owner had no idea what this large wooden structure was, but once that was discovered, it was brought here to the museum and has been on display ever since. Now, the history of the gibbet and executions in Genesee County goes back all the way to 1807. However, this is not something that has been done quite recently, as the last one occurred in 1881. Probably the most famous execution, which didn't occur on this gibbet. This gibbet was actually the second one built and was used for the last about 3 of the hangings out of the 7 total. But the first is probably the most famous in 1807. A man by the name of James McLean was condemned to death for killing a man over a tree on his property. And to add more intrigue to it, a second man was actually killed in the altercation, but McLean was never charged with that murder. So McLean was sentenced to hang in 1807. However, things got off to a rocky start. The rope that they were going to use for the purpose was not strong enough and actually broke halfway through the hanging. And this led to a famous tale, though we don't believe there's any truth behind it, that when McLean fell back to the ground, he said, "Hang me again because I killed 2 people." There's no confirmation that he ever did say that, but it's definitely an intriguing story. So the county clerk was summoned to grab a thicker rope, and the second time they did the job. Now, every hanging in Genesee County's history was the result of murder. So this was not something that was done for petty, everyday crimes. This was only reserved for the highest and worst of the crimes. However, this was not some solitary, confined event. This actually would be publicized, and people from all around would come to these events and witness the hanging in public. And they would even sell tickets to this, which would often pay for the hanging itself, so it ended up becoming sort of a fundraising event at times. And several of the executions actually drew thousands of people to them. In fact, we have a ticket on display here from a hanging in 1866 of a man by Levi Mayhew, in which people bought the ticket and brought it to the execution and were able to pay to watch. And I'll show you that as well. It's right over here, if you can see that. Little orange slip of paper there. So it's a rather famous or infamous piece we have here. And there are plenty of more information on all the people that met their fate by this implement. However, However, there's one story I'd like to tell about someone who escaped the rope, and her name was Polly Frisch. She was convicted of the murder of her husband and children and the attempted murder of her second husband by poisoning. And this was only found out after her second husband actually recovered from the poisoning, and they were able to piece the process together. Now, she was sentenced to be hanged. However, due to the fact that she was a woman, there was great outcry that they should not hang a woman. It just wasn't done. So she was sentenced to life in prison, and then was transferred to an insane asylum, and was released after quite a long time and disappeared. But she's the only woman to be given the death sentence, but it was never carried out. So if you'd like to know more about the Gibbet, the hangings of Genesee County, feel free to stop by the museum when we are back open, or check out various resources online. But it's a very fascinating piece of history that I think people underestimate the power of. So I'd like to thank everyone for checking out this video, and we'll be trying to post as many as we can with all the wonderful artifacts we have from Genesee County's history. So thank you again, and have a wonderful day.